Making sure this works.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Raad. How are you?
I'm very well.
Thank you for joining us at COP28.
It is my
pleasure. And for this very interesting fireside chat that we're about to have. If you don't mind, I'm going to set the scene for a couple of minutes, and then we'll transition right into some of the things that we want to talk about. Global energy demand for power is going to go up by 50% globally, and that's an average number. And as you and I know, law of averages sometimes can be misleading. There's obviously going to be growth globally. Electrification in the Western world is going to skyrocket because of many different sectors that are demanding power. However, there's also the other side of the world that still needs to electrify for the basics and then go through their transition. 50% up by 2050 is what we're expecting. The Middle East and Asia are going to go and grow at a faster clip for natural reasons. As we know in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's going to double capacity demand over the next up to 2030. And this theme continues as we go on into other parts of this part of the world. So this makes, and we are at COP28, so this makes this balance agenda of this trifecta of growth, affordability, and sustainability a very important triangle that we need to balance. And this balance has to be global. One of the themes that at least is coming out for me in this COP, and I don't know about you, we'll talk about that, is the fact that this balance, this issue is a global issue, but we don't have a global government. So the standards need to be done in a cohesive fashion, and these themes are coming out loud and clear. If we think about the Middle East, and we think about the Middle East position as an energy supplier to the world, all the math says that both from a renewable point of view and from a conventional point of view, this part of the world will remain an energy fulcrum to meet that global demand that we talked about earlier. However, the Middle East is also making massive strides towards this energy transition, and your company is one of those that is pioneering the path, for the lack of a better word, and stating commitments, net zeros by specific dates. Now it's translating into a corporate fashion across multiple sectors. So the question becomes, how do you bridge these continents and energy supply? And that's really the theme of what we're having in this fireside chat that we've set up today. So for those of us who are listening online, to help us talk through this, Raad Al Saady, you are the vice chairman of Aqua Power. You're also the managing director. And I wanted to give you a couple of minutes to kind of tell us who Aqua is, what you do, and what your plans are before we go into some of the more detailed points.
So thank you, Akram. I'm really looking forward to this fireside chat, and allow me to start by just telling you, which you probably know a little bit, but to elaborate a bit about Aqua Power. So Aqua Power is a company that was founded in Saudi Arabia in 2004. We are the world's largest private desalination company. We're probably more known for power, but we are the largest desalination company. We, of course, have the largest green hydrogen project in the world as well. We do some conventional gas to power as well with combined cycles. But we also are known for being in the renewable space and leading renewable energy in the region. And to achieve that, we have had to transition over the last 19 years, coming up on 20 years, and that will be part of our discussion later today, how we started, where we are today, and where we want to go by 2030. We just approved our strategy. We're calling it Aqua Power 2.0, which is basically tripling the size of Aqua Power by 2030. Which you can imagine, I was heartened by the announcement that was made by His Excellency Sultan Al Jaber about 180 countries looking to triple their investments in renewable and green energy by 2030, which makes us at Aqua Power's board feel that we're on track.
Fantastic. So let's get into it. I've heard you multiple times make this statement. Aqua is a local company. When we go into a geography, and I know you're in many, we operate as a local company. And under the theme of bridging continents, tell us more about that. Tell us more about how you approach that and how you go about making sure that we are a Saudi-based firm, we are global, but we're also local. And I think that's an interesting dynamic when you think about it.
Yeah, you often hear the term glocal, and I think that applies fairly to Aqua Power. We're global in nature, but we're also local everywhere we are. If you visit, and I welcome you to visit many of our countries where we operate, you'll find a local team involved in CSR, involved in a local supply chain, obviously involved in doing business in that country as well. But it's a nuanced relationship. It's not just a transactional. Every country we go to, when we hire a country head, we always tell them we're planning to be here for a minimum of 100 years. PPAs tend to be 25 to 35 years, but our mindset, every country we go to, is we want to be there for 100 years. And we have this conversation with every new country manager that please keep in mind that you're going to be there for 100 years, you and your successors. So we are local in that mindset. Now, if I want to pivot a little bit into supply chain, into the global infrastructure, actually that fits very well. If you look at even renewable projects, part of the greenness of a project is how your supply chain works. How far do you ship your raw materials? How far do you ship your products? It's not just the end product. There's a lot that goes into it. The more you can localize, the more you can build local content, the faster it is, the more cost effective it is, but also the more energy efficient your entire process is. Building local content, and it takes time, but building local content in a country, being local in a country, is actually also good for business, besides being the right thing to do. And it's good for the environment too. Shipping things like, for example, in the NEOM Green Hydrogen project or in Saudi Arabia overall, our local content has exceeded the targets that were set out. And it's helping us. It's reducing time, reducing cost, but also reducing the overall carbon footprint.
And we're seeing these energy sources shifting dramatically. You've mentioned the green hydrogen project in Saudi Arabia, and that fundamentally is an export kind of play. And I wanted to get into the export session and the export thinking a little bit later. However, we're seeing that these sources are shifting dramatically. I know that in one of your home markets in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we've got a 50-50 target for renewable versus conventional, and yet to get there you need to maintain yourself as a corporate in an agile fashion when it comes to making your decisions and making how do you invest and where do you invest and how do you finance, and I want to get a little bit into how do you take that thinking to more of an Asian and Middle Eastern economy thinking. Is it one size fits all, or does it actually matter? And how do you tailor towards the different demands and needs? Not everybody has a 50-50% split targets, right? So how do you position yourselves in economies, translating yourself as a corporate into these new economies?
So thank you for that question, because what we start with is our goal is to be net zero by 2050. Then you reverse engineer almost everything you do. Today, when we say we're going to do X project, you can extrapolate, because these are long-term commitments, 25, 30 years. That goes into 2050. So you know every time now, effectively, when you sign a new agreement, how that's going to look in 2050. So now you're in that mindset. Energy transition, by definition, means different things. It's just a transition. It's not it's fluid. So, for example, we are very proud of a project that we have here in Dubai, for example, that was a coal project called Hasyan that we converted into clean gas. We have open cycles in other countries that we had that we closed into combined cycles in gas. We've converted liquid-fired desalination into reverse osmosis. We've taken some plants that has less solar panels, added some solar panels to them to increase the efficiency. So there's not a lot of massive billion-dollar ideas out there. It's every project. We have about 80 existing assets. In every project, plus the new ones that are coming. How can we do? And of course, with that, you have to communicate with the off-taker, with your lenders, because that energy transition with your equity partners, you're not alone. You have to make a case. Sometimes the case is an obvious one and it's a no-brainer. In some cases, it has some implication on tariff, and that you have to constantly negotiate. But we're finding the conversations easier today than they were 2 years ago. The energy transition is a one-way highway, and everyone is aligned, and we can see those conversations getting easier. We can see a lot of people tell you that the energy transition is real until it comes down to asking people to pay a little bit more, then that premium is not there. We can begin to see it now a little bit. People are willing to pay. As long as you have clarity, you have timelines, you have deliverables, I think people will sign up for that. So the energy transition will mean different things in different countries. In some countries, when you say, for example, we've converted from this to that, they will think it's less than ambitious. But it's just transition. You have to go and improve every one of those assets.
We were in a session yesterday, actually, you just triggered a thought. We were in a session yesterday where the concept of green hydrogen came up. And for the lack of a better word, the volatility of it as an energy source. Mind you, it was based on the premise that it's not the solution, it's one of the solutions, right? You've pioneered the path in green hydrogen. You are the only large-scale financially closed producer of green hydrogen on the planet at the moment. That's a risky move, Raad. That's a pretty risky move. Or do you not see it as a risky move? Tell us what you think about that.
I think it's the same thinking that was taking place when Aqua Power started solar energy and renewable energy and CSPs and reverse osmosis in desalination. So if you wait until the ground is perfect and fertile and ripe to invest, it's too late, in our opinion. We believe that you go in with great partners, which we're doing with Air Products and NEOM, with 23 financial institutions, with many other partners, subcontractors, EPCs. If you have the right partner, then you can have a table where you sit down and discuss challenges, because there are challenges. When you're the first at anything, there will be the challenges. If you follow Aqua Power recently, there's a lot of announcements about being the first this or the largest that and those come with challenges. Today, if I may just get off just for a second, pivot. Today we're launching with the presence of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, Noor Energy Project, which is the world's only project that has 3 different types of solar technology in one park. The world's tallest tower, over 260 meters. The world's only solar energy asset that can dispatch 24 hours a day. The world's largest thermal storage. So that's a lot of first and only. Those come with a ton of challenges, but we're opening today. Back to green hydrogen. Yeah. Green hydrogen, so hydrogen itself, creating hydrogen, that part is not new. It's how do you bring the energy, what energy source do you use to create that hydrogen, to split the hydrogen from the oxygen. So you've heard the terms, just for the benefit of listeners, if you'll allow me for a minute, because I talk a lot about green hydrogen and then I leave the room and people ask me and say, listen, I don't know what green hydrogen is. So just for the benefit of those. So you hear a few colors when it comes to hydrogen. I'll explain a few. Gray hydrogen is your conventional way of doing hydrogen, using conventional energy to create hydrogen. Then you hear of pink hydrogen, which is nuclear energy to create hydrogen. And you hear blue hydrogen, which is similar to gray, but then you sequester the CO2. And finally, the only hydrogen we do, which is green hydrogen, using renewable resources to create hydrogen. So we use wind and solar. Of course, there's the water element as well, and there's storage. So if you think about it, it's actually 5 projects almost. The hydrogen part, the storage, the wind, and the solar, besides the transmission, besides everything else. But these are minimum 5 large projects. 4 of these projects we have great comfort in doing, and we've done before. The hydrogen part, we're working with Air Products, who are incredibly capable of doing this and one of the leading industrial gas companies in the world. So the complicated part is the innovation around the integration of all of that. And the real challenge is offtake. Yep. Because it's still a challenge, and we just announced last week our second project in the great country of Uzbekistan, where we're going to have our second green hydrogen project. And if you follow us, you'll see there's going to be more announcements. So in a few years, when you and I will sit in another fireside chat, I hope, we'll be talking about the next challenge, where this becomes like solar, we hope, like renewable, just something we take for granted.
And I think this pioneering element and this learning that the rest of the globe can pick up actually came out in the conversation yesterday with a few other folks on the topic of green hydrogen specifically, which actually brings me, and you mentioned the offtake part, but it brings me to this concept of interconnectivity, and the theme of this discussion today, at least some of it, is to do with bridging the continents, right? I know that certain players in this region here, from a G2G and from a corporate perspective, have and want to embark on an interconnectivity of grids, interconnectivity of power, and the ability to play the peak and trough cycles in your capacity capabilities. Where are you, and how important is getting this right in order to bridge continents? I think that's an important topic that needs to be. It's peripheral at the moment because everyone's focused on their own markets, but it's an important part, especially in a transitionary point of view, where you're trying to make sure that you do get to the targets that these countries are setting for themselves.
So excellent question, honestly, but let me go back to the local. Even the local, there are challenges. Yeah. Because, then I'll go to global, but allow me to start with local. Locally, there's a challenge because grids are used to a certain type of energy, a base load. You're introducing a lot of intermittent into the system. Not all grids are ready for all that renewable energy, for that intermittent nature. We actually, as Aqua Power, have gone to a lot of countries that have said to us, can you build us X amount of renewable? And our answer is not an automatic yes. Our answer is, can we study your grid? Can we study or hire someone to study the transmission? Because there's no sense in creating energy if you can't get it to where it needs to go. Yep. Of course, as a developer, if you take a short-term view or a narrow view, you can say my job is to generate or to develop, and then the grids or the utilities job is to get you to the last point. But that's not how we see things. We're there for a reason, to get energy, to get water to homes, to businesses. So locally, there's an issue. That's why we're investing in understanding grids further. Now, transporting, for example, green fuels. We are working, for example, just as one example, with shipping companies to understand what's the next step in shipping green hydrogen, because today we're not there yet. That's why you see a lot of green ammonia being shipped. Of course, that has some cost associated because, you need to then, once it arrives at destination, convert it back to hydrogen. There's some costs associated. So today we're not at our super efficient, but we're not watching. We're actually sitting down having these conversations. So today these are some of the challenges. On the renewable side is how do you pump all that intermittent into grids? On the international side, how do you find more efficient ways to ship green fuels?
And obviously the size of the molecule with hydrogen becomes a very, very, let's just say it's not a conventional gas molecule. It actually creates some sort of security aspect to the infrastructure itself.
Yeah, I'll take it one step further even, because a lot of places are looking at transporting electricity, which is fine, of course. But we think the next step is transporting fuels. And the next step after that is transporting green industry or exporting green industry. If you create green hydrogen at plant X, if you can have a factory next to it that does steel or aluminum or mining, then you create green products. That adds more downstream to the countries, create jobs, but also reduces all the logistics issues because shipping final goods or goods at the end is different than shipping the fuels and then creating the goods. So I think that's one of the conversations that may seem beyond our remit as an energy developer. But honestly, these conversations are conversations we're trying to have because that's the real energy transition. I think it's not the generation part. Generation is the beginning. It's what do you do with that energy? Are you creating industry? Are you creating SAF? Are you creating shipping fuels? Are you creating a green mobility? These are the conversations that we're beginning to have today. Today, most of what you hear is about transporting electricity and maybe some fuels like NEOM. But even within NEOM, I think there's great conversations. I think NEOM has been pioneering in green hydrogen. I think you wouldn't be surprised to hear that there are conversations today about being pioneering in green industry as well.
Gotcha. And speaking of things that, at least for the past 4 or 5 days, I personally haven't heard a lot of, and it's water. Water scarcity. You started off by saying that we are both. We are an energy generation company, but we're also a water company. And I believe you're also one of the largest water companies on the planet, really.
We're the largest private water company in the world.
So how do you think about water scarcity? How do you come into the fray thinking about combining aqua and positioning aqua as both, right? And where do you see the biggest pockets of, well, corporate value is one, but also access to water is another one. How do you balance that in your mind?
This is the heart piece of aqua power. Water is life, and I think we don't talk about water enough. We, the collective we. When you talk about climate change, people often associate that with, of course, rightfully with environment and energy, but they don't often talk about water. Climate change affects water. I was in a country recently that, for the first time in its history, has had 5 years of drought. And one of the issues that specific country has is they have huge water reservoirs, but because of the temperature increases, they're watching evaporation happen at a much faster pace, and they can't keep up. You can't build desalination plants fast enough if you have fast evaporation. So that specific country said to us, can you build us X number of desalination plants? And if we were, again, short-sighted, we could say, yes, of course, we'd love to build you a gazillion desalination plants, but that doesn't work. It's a race against time. So we talk to them, and these conversations are ongoing, is what if we create some floating PVs? This will cover the water surface, reduce the evaporation, which is the real issue, and then use that green energy that's being created to desal. In other places, you'll find that you need to have more bespoke solutions. The challenge with desal historically has been it's high in energy consumption, which makes it expensive. So you've seen it mainly in regions where water scarcity is very high, and also energy costs are reasonable, or countries can afford to do it. In countries where they can't afford high ticket price for water, which is until recently, you don't see it. One of the issues is also it used to depend on liquefier or conventional energy. So we needed to do 3 things. First of all, we, even as a market leader, as the world's largest private desal company, we made it a target to reduce tariffs. And you know enough about aqua power and our reputation. We tend to, every market we go to, drive the price down. And that sort of creates a different buzz, to be very kind. Every market we go to is that we're going to bring the prices down. I remember recently we won a tender, and the second lowest price was 17% higher than us, which is a massive, 17% in a bid is a very big difference. So there are folks around the table saying, we left money on the table. That's not how we see it. The way we see it is we're successfully pushing the price down. The next bid and the next tender, I promise you'll find people finding efficiencies and optimizations to try to bridge the 17%. By then we will be lower because we will find even more. Because the more you do this, because when the folks that were saying we left money on the table, we told them wait and see. Suddenly we started getting calls from countries that have never called about desalination, saying, you know what, at that price point, I think we can talk. If we had to price it hypothetically 16% more expensive, we would have won the bid. We would have felt like winners, but we wouldn't have had those phone calls, which matter more to us. Countries that need water that today can't afford it. So we believe, so the three things is bring your tariff down, make those plants more green, because again, this is one of the things that are an issue as well. If you look at, recently we've announced 5 different assets that are going to, and there's going to be more announcements soon, that are either partially or fully green. So Hassyan IWP here in Dubai is the first project, utility scale project in the world that's 100% depends on green energy. So we're calling it green water. We have another smaller scale, fully green one in Red Sea Global. We have projects in Saudi and UAE and other places that have partial green energy. So reliability, tariff, and clean water is the 3 things we're focusing on today.
I want to make sure that we cover, at least in the 15 minutes or soon that we have, time that we have. There's two other things that I really want to cover. One is the technology aspect. Solar, we know we're at a point right now where the experience curve has dropped low enough, the scale and the supply has dropped. Well, the supply crunch is coming, but the supply has dropped enough and the experience has dropped enough to make it a very, very sustainable economic solution. And obviously, when I think about Morocco to Bahrain, we get 25% of the solar energy that comes from the sun in this part of the world. So there's a massive amount of play here that then can be used for various reasons, whether it's for desal, whether it's for any other green type of initiatives. But there's also many technologies out there that are still in their nascency, for the lack of a better word. How do you as a corporate think about that? How do you think about deploying it? How do you think about investing the dollar of capex when it comes to nascent technologies and position yourself, and I'll say this bluntly, to continue to be the pioneer when it comes to different techs in the green space, both on the power side and on the water side?
So thank you, Akram, for that question. I'll add just one, if you'll allow me, one aspect, which is whenever we have these conversations, we usually talk about the supply of water or the supply of energy. What we don't talk about enough is demand. There's a lot that could be done to reduce demand that we don't discuss enough. We just want to keep our same bad habits, but create a lot more water and energy to support those bad habits. We need to change our habits as well. Again, as a producer of water and energy, maybe that's not what you're expecting me to say, because my job is to, you think,
produce
more. And but that's not really what our mission is or our calling is. We think by reducing demand, we will have a more sustainable value proposition. We cannot continue to have incredible consumption of water and energy and just keep pushing everyone to feed those. I'd rather reduce it and have a more fair distribution in different parts of the world for energy and water and serve those than have a concentration of water and energy in certain places that don't have efficiencies. I'll give you an example. In water, do you know that in some places 50% of the water is lost in the pipes, leaks? You know what a shame that is? That means for every 2 plants you build, 1 plant is useless. Now that you can say, if you take, again, a narrow view, you say, I built those 2 plants, I've made the returns I want. But you just created, I know it's not our fault, but on paper, we, not Aquapower, we have created a useless plant. If you, or 50% of it useless, let's put it that way. So it's not just enough to produce more. We need to say, how can we have less demand? Energy is the same thing. There is a lot of leakage in energy waste. So that's, I just wanted to cover that. Again, back to your question about how we can find ways. Sorry, can you repeat?
It was about the nascency of technologies and the spectrum of technologies that you have, and how you think about, translating the targets that governments are setting into place into a corporate world, and how do you think about that dollar of capex and where you spend it on R&D?
So thank you. So there are there's good friction here in our philosophy. So there are two schools of thought. One that says the best way to make sure technology takes place that serves where you want to go is to invest in that technology. And there is fair rationale behind that thinking. There's another school of thought that says don't get too married to any technology, stay agile, and continue to be technology agnostic so that whenever the best technology is available out there, you can go for it and you don't have to be tied to some arm of your company that has made investments in another part. Some will say you can do it and you keep an arm's length relationship between the two. It's slightly more complicated than that. We sort of are trying to find that balance as we speak. So we tend to do a little bit, very little in research, very little in terms of percent. So we're not trying to buy 99% of a company to understand what they do, but we will look at seed to further understand. But that's not going to be for immediate use for our projects. For our projects, we continue to be agile because it's fair to our end users. The last thing I want to do is say, please use that technology, Mr. End User or Mrs. End User, because I've invested in it. So we'll continue to use Seed to understand more. We do have an innovation team that's incredibly capable, and you need it now as you're doing firsts and largest. I want to say one more thing, and maybe if you have an audience of consultants, I presume you might have today, this what I'm saying next might be of interest. In the past, consulting firms have matrix structures, and a lot of them you find subject matter experts on one side crossing with regional, in some cases, in some consulting firms. If you think about this part of the world, we tend to have, in a lot of cases, regional heads who tap into subject matter experts that sit in other parts of the world. That's been historically the way it has looked, because innovation has come from different parts of the world, and your colleagues that sit in the region here will talk to their colleagues in other parts and bring those new ideas and innovations to this part of the world. Thank you for that. But moving forward, we should be, with especially energy transition, doing the opposite. We should have some of the subject matter experts on water, on energy, sitting here. We have a lot of new technologies, innovations, green hydrogen you've seen, in desalination. Ideally, you, Akram, would be getting calls from your colleagues in Europe and the US and other parts of the world saying, what are you guys doing in hydrogen in your part of the world? Can you bring some of your colleagues from the Middle East to visit our New York office or San Francisco office or London office? So this to your colleagues, I think, is going to challenge the historical way the matrix structure has worked. It'll continue probably to be similar in structure, but the flow might be moving a little bit differently.
Yeah, agreed. One of the themes in this COP28 is financing the transition.
Yes.
I happen to know, but maybe others don't, that you're a bit of an expert in financing and ability to corral finances. You know, there's some massive numbers out there about what is needed to get this done. Talk to us about that microcosm of financing that you and the world that you live in your world of Aqua, when it comes to financing these type of ambitious moves.
So because it's a finance question, allow me to get into numbers a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think it's only fair.
Absolutely.
So this year we've had financial close of just over $14 billion. For that space, it's a massive number. It's allowed us to go from being preferred bidder to financially closing much faster than we've been able to do in the past. That's a reflection of the maturity of the off-taker, our ability to improve, but also the lenders being quite comfortable with the space and with our relationships as well. So we're very satisfied, and I'll give a shout out to our group CFO, Abdul Hamid Al-Meherib, who's done a wonderful job. This will be my first and only shout out, but he's really done a very wonderful job for us. I'll use one example, if you'll allow me. A project that everyone is interested in, NEOM Green Hydrogen Company, $8.5 billion project. 6.1 billion of that is financed. We had financial commitments from 4 banks to reach 6.1 billion. Guess how many banks we ended up going with? 23. We had 4. They're predominantly local and regional. We ended up spending a lot of time, like you said, talking to these 4 and to others, saying, please reduce your allocation. We'd like as many financial institutions as possible to get a feel for what green hydrogen is. So when us or others do the next green hydrogen project, there's a higher level of comfort. I promise you those were hard conversations. If you're someone that can immediately provide $1 billion or $2 billion, and you're watching us talking to you about reducing that allocation so I can give great partners like KfW from Germany or JP Morgan or Standard Charter, a lot of our great partners. But we did it for a reason. And by the way, it ended up being significantly more work for us because, you know, due diligence for 23 banks is different than for 4 banks. But we believe that was the financially responsible thing, macroeconomically speaking. And it's paying off. I think us and others now can have those mature conversations. Because for solar, you'll find that financing is not your biggest challenge. It's a mature, relatively mature technology now. People understand the risks. They can risk it. They can do a good job. But for green hydrogen, for some of the other technologies, maybe offshore wind, maybe some others that are challenged a little bit, or in terms of people understanding them, the job is not it's not just the lender's job. It's the off-taker's job, but also the developer's job. We need to do a better job of sitting down in settings like this, having, we know what they call NDRs or non-deal roadshows, going out and meeting folks, explaining what we do. So that's what I just came back from Japan. I'm going to be going out again. We do a lot of these, which is create awareness about why funding this space is important. But to be fair to financial institutions, they're also in a difficult position. And you won't hear a developer voice a lot of empathy, but allow me to do that. Today, it's hard for financial institutions to do conventional business. They get a lot of pushback for doing conventional, which is profitable. They get significantly more pressure to do renewable, which is less profitable for them, but also they can't do enough. The space is not big enough for them, for their balance sheets. So they're caught between not being able to do the business that is profitable and they would love to do and where scale is, and pressure to do the smaller size, low profit. So the transition is going to have to be well articulated within their boards, with their shareholders to make a case for why this energy transition needs to take place. So we're quite empathetic partners when it comes to our financial institution brethren.
What markets excite you now? And obviously don't divulge any secrets from Aqua 2.0, but where do you see we need to be in this space? And I'm talking geographically. I know you're quite active globally, and then where do you see that shift happening as well? Obviously taking into context that some markets are much more highly regulated, thus require quite a bit of maneuvering to get through and to get in, and some are actually, excuse the pun here, green. So where are you getting excited nowadays?
So you'll see a smile on our face at Aqua, a collective smile, when we see a market that's difficult to penetrate or that's challenging. That gets us out of bed. You know, that excites us. How do we go to markets that are difficult, that are challenged, that need us, but don't have the framework today, or don't have the credit rating, or don't have the off-taker setup or the bankability? We get excited about that. There are markets today in Africa which really, where we want to do a lot more business, where today it's not easy to invest. You need to convince lenders, you need to convince off-takers. It's a great place and a place that needs that energy transition, but there isn't enough developers going there and asking a lot of questions. We're doing that right now. You're going to see a few announcements coming up. We're very excited. We think Africa is really the future. There's so much resources, there's so much need, and the penetration of renewable and access to water is still extremely low. And we believe as a global leader in this space that we can impact change there. We can go and we can bring our financial partners and we can talk to off-takers. And with Saudi Arabia as our, backing up our G2G, which you need in a lot of these cases. I mean, I want to maybe give my second shout out to Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia and Ministry of Investments, which has led in a lot of these discussions where we followed. I've accompanied a lot of, there's a strong will in Saudi Arabia to do more in energy transition. I have traveled with the Ministry of Energy, with His Excellency Khalid Al-Falih, Ministry of Investments, and we need to continue to do that. So I think if you follow us, and I hope you do, over the next few months, you'll see, actually soon you'll see quite a few announcements when it's come to Africa. But the most exciting markets for us always are the markets we're already in. That's always the most exciting market because we haven't scratched the surface yet. You've heard about our plans for China, and we do believe there's huge potential for us with the G2G relationship as well. But we need to continue to serve our clients today in the markets we're in today, in Middle East, Central Asia, CIS, North Africa, where we exist today. We also have announcements in Indonesia market we're excited about, Thailand and many others. So just follow us, please. I think it's going to be exciting 2024.
No, I mean, on that note, and given the theme of bridging continents, right, between Asia and Middle East and North Africa, I think that's a great note to close off this fireside chat on. I mean, any closing remarks from you, Raad, on this topic?
Thank you very much. When I looked at how much time we've allotted for this, I was wondering how can we fill all that time. Now, part of me wanted it to be a 3-hour fire chat. No one would show up for that, but I would be very happy to engage with that. We can do it over coffee maybe sometime.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Akram.
Thank you, Raad.